So we would do both watching the video and listen to her account?
Correct. And then the exit ticket would be basically inferring what's going on.
So should they have to take notes?
At Up Academy, every week, every department team has at least one half day where they don't teach in order to be able to meet with the rest of the department and talk about what's happened so far, analyze data, look at upcoming lessons, and really norm on what our units are looking like. Every department at Up Academy has one of those half days. The 6th grade English team, we have present myself and Anna and Jocelyn, who are both 6th grade English teachers. We also have present 3 co-teachers, who one is an ELL teacher and 2 are special ed teachers. So the 6 of us come together to be able to look both long-term and short-term at what's developing in 6th grade English.
Collaboration is really at the fabric of our curriculum and instruction, and we really built it into our schedules. So in order to do that structurally, we do have a longer school day. In addition, our encore teachers, music, art, and gym, those teachers teach the students that would be in class but are out of class because those teachers are in their planning block.
The planning blocks allow us to make sure that every single student in the 6th grade, all 135 of them, are all being taught the same exact lesson that came from the same place. As we read through this poem, we're going to be looking for imagery, and we're going to be looking for the author's tone. And ultimately, we're going to figure out what is the theme of this poem. So first, we're going to take a look at the title, Strange Fruit. Go ahead and circle strange.
Today, we taught a lesson that was in Jocelyn's sequence that she had planned. Before we even taught it, a month ago, Jocelyn proposed in the unit plan roughly the content that she wanted to cover and the standards that she really wanted to focus the sequence around. 2 weeks ago, she actually brought the exit tickets for those lessons to planning block so we could talk about if these are the end goals, the kind of questions and tasks students should be able to accomplish at the end of the lesson, what kind of thinking and what kind of questions do they have to ask themselves and show evidence of during class to be able to answer those exit tickets.
Absolutely. So the strange fruit must be really important, must be connected to the South. What do we think the strange fruit is? What is the strange fruit is? I want you to tell me what you think it is and tell me how you know. What kind of figurative language is that?
I think the strange fruit is the African Americans because
Today's lesson was about using the poem Strange Fruit and analyzing it in order to figure out how the poet uses imagery to develop a theme in the story. That's a pretty big, typical Common Core idea to be able to explain how really incredible images, words, sensory details are used to develop a deeper universal message. So when I was looking at Jocelyn's lesson, one of the things that really came to us was exploding words for their different connotations, interpreting images, figuring out what the fruit represent, figuring out what bitter really tells us, figuring out what a lot of those key words, how they work together to tell us the poet's perspective and also more about the setting. What does the author want us to realize?
A typical planning block starts with materials review. During that time, the team vets the materials for either the next week or the following weeks. Everyone owns a standard or a set of materials for the following week, and they bring the skeleton for their materials, including the exit ticket, to the planning meeting. And they spend significant time really understanding what the standard is asking of students and then how they plan on getting at-bats with that practice throughout the lesson. And the team will ask questions about that and make sort of suggestions about changes that have to happen, and then we'll create a deadline for when those changes will need to be done.
So the idea would be that, and we can work on figuring this out, but this is an audio, I found this website actually has audio of her saying, like giving her account of what happened, and then the eyes on the prize is like the first 5 to 10 minutes is an actual visual of her walking into the building, and then there's Melba's account of what she saw when Elizabeth Egbert. So like there are 3 different perspectives. Yep. One thing is happening. I mean, it would be interesting since this is the first time we've introduced this standard. What do you gather? What do all these sources suggest about what was really happening? Do you gain an emotional perspective that you don't in another one? Just talking about lots of different media and how it can present subjects. So I didn't know whether or not we would spend the morning reading and listening to her words and then watching in the afternoon, and then the next day doing an analysis. we can scratch that. Like we could combine it into one class. I don't really know because we've never done it before and would love feedback.
I almost feel like it would be more impactful if we actually watched the movie first, because Elizabeth, her account of it is obviously going to be very, very different from you watching it. Like every single person who watches it is going to have their own perspective of what they think happened to Elizabeth.
And then to be able
And
to square it.
Yeah, I
with-
think it'd be interesting to have like that, your initial like gut reaction to what you're seeing, and then what did Elizabeth actually feel versus watching it knowing how Elizabeth felt.
Okay.
That makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I like that. I'm just thinking about the structure of both lessons.
What I want to happen most in planning block is the discussion, is the thinking, is the pushing back on each other, is the norming. The big goal today then was to be able to start by having a high level, long-term plan for our new unit, look at lessons that are upcoming in a sequence 2 weeks ahead. And then the next thing that we did was we did data analysis for exit tickets from the last week. And we had all agreed to take a really deep dive look at Monday morning's exit tickets to see where students had struggled and where students had succeeded. After looking at the data, we all came together, and since it was Jocelyn's lesson, I had her lead off. So Jocelyn, why don't you talk about like what you saw?
Okay. So mine are right there. But basically what I noticed was question number 1, students were either choosing contempt or disapproving. Yeah. And there's this idea of disapproving is not incorrect, but it's not the best answer. And I don't think that students are, well, one, they just don't understand the difference between the two, and 2, or they aren't fully exploding those words.
She noticed that students were really struggling to choose between 2 different tone words to describe a tone that was subtly nuanced. So what we had to talk about is how can we highlight those nuances and have students realize that.
So I think we need to sweat not only those 2 things, but context, and just say that thousands of times. Like, okay, one, you explode your words, or like, words, connotation, context.
It's also a time when support teachers will bring in their input around differentiation that might need to happen, and they make what's called a differentiation plan, and that's separate from the lesson plan. So they'll look at their caseload of students and they'll say, if we're working on central idea next Tuesday, what does a subgroup of students need that might be foundational for that central idea work?
In today's meeting, I came in towards the end of the meeting, and the goal was to look at data based on how each student is performing on the major Common Core standards for 6th grade English, and creating targeted tutoring groups. So I was looking at students from my caseload and how they performed on every standard, and then splitting those up into groups, whether they were really low, so scored below 50% proficiency, or they were sort of in that high mid-level, which would be above 50%.
If you just select his, then you can see what he's lowest in, and he's lowest in 6.4. So that tells me like, okay, great, he's gonna go in my 6.4 group.
To develop that planning block and make it effective, one of the most important things we do is identify a teacher leader within that department who really owns the planning and facilitation process.
I'm gonna give us a quick time check here. I think we should go until 1:15, which is when PM break starts, with your sequence.
Okay.
And then look at our exit tickets.
We found in the first year that when you get a bunch of experts around a table without a plan, that you can talk about a lot of interesting things, but maybe not accomplish all the things that need to be accomplished with the upcoming deadlines, with lessons, and with assessments that are coming up. So we found that adding a very explicit layer of facilitation to the meetings greatly increased the ability of those small teams to generate actual work out of the meeting. The other layer of support we've added is that our deans of curriculum and instruction, many of whom led grade level departments, observe them and give feedback to those facilitators about how to run the meeting more effectively.
In terms of how I support the team, I meet with the facilitators. So for instance, for the meeting today, Anjali and I met and kind of created the structure for that data analysis, and I gave her the data points for that.
One of the problems it does create is the fact that you have three really different minds trying to come together to design one really cohesive thing, which is a really big challenge. And over the last 2 years, we've added planning structures, like the unit planning structure, a lot of coaching, looking at a lot of model lessons, done a lot of co-planning, co-facilitating these meetings to help mitigate that issue. But where planning blocks work the best is where a team has the discipline to use the time to kind of have a zoom in and zoom out look at the curriculum, to take some time to look at the minute details of a lesson, but to also step back and look 2 months ahead of time. And that has to be an explicit message from a leadership team, and there has to be some structures put in place to help people understand how to do that. And the other thing I would say to keep in mind is that it's got to be a product-based meeting, not a talk-based meeting. So everyone should walk out with a set of deliverable materials or unit plans or action plans. And that's how you have to judge the usefulness of the time, not how well the discussion goes, but what things are made because of the discussion. Having these planning blocks and specifically having people whose job it is to facilitate them has just created another avenue, I think, for our teachers to develop as leaders. So from a professional standpoint, it's created an opportunity for a lot of people, maybe in their second or third year of teaching, who might be on a longer path to school leadership, but are getting development every week without kind of taking away from the core of their job, which is to make sure students are getting better.
The thing that's most important to me as a teacher in terms of collaborating with my colleagues is the overall support that I get and that we get in general. Something my colleague always says is 3 heads are better than 1, and that's something that I absolutely agree with. If I don't know what to do, if I think this question isn't making sense, there's this word that I'm trying to think of and I can't figure it out, my colleague is right there to be like, oh, try this, oh, try that. And because we're all going to be teaching the same lessons, we all feel accountable for and we all feel ownership over every single lesson that we produce. The planning block has had a huge impact on my teaching. I think that it has allowed me to become a better teacher faster because I have other people around me who are showing me what I'm doing well, who are encouraging me when I'm doing well, but at the same time are letting me know, this makes sense here, but it doesn't really make sense here. So as a first-year teacher, it's huge to have colleagues who are there with me to guide me along my way and to be there to just support me.